Hello everyone. Alternative comedy. What is alternative comedy and what impact has it have on the comedy world? To answer those two questions, we must look for the origins of alternative comedy. Alternative comedy has its origins in the British comedy troupe known as Monty Python. The group consists of John Cleese, Graham Chapman, Michael Palin, Eric Idle, Terry Jones, and Terry Gilliam. Monty Python first started off together as a sketch comedy group in the late 60s through the early 70s that created one of the greatest sketch comedy shows of all time called Monty Python and the Flying Circus. There were other sketch shows before the Flying Circus, but this one was a completely different, original, and a edgy sketch show for its time. And with that being said, they completely changed how you could do sketch shows. The sketches usually featured a bizarre premise with bizarre characters with innuendos in it, and the sketches did not end in the punchline. They also sought out to make fun of television. The show also had animations in between these sketches as well that were made and produced by the only American member of Monty Python, who is Terry Gilliam. It was one of the first comedy shows that blended surreal, dark, and satirical comedy. They blended these three genres of comedy pretty well, and dozens over dozens of future comedians would try to emulate this style in their own way. Two of these comedians that would emulate this style of comedy are Trey Parker and Matt Stone, who have cited Monty Python as one of their all-time influences. And with that, they created one of the greatest adult anime shows of all time, which is South Park. This style of comedy of Monty Python's would continue beyond the 4 seasons of The Flying Circus with their 3 movies, which are Monty Python and the Holy Grail, Monty Python and the Life of Brian, and Monty Python and the Meaning of Life. Sadly, the Monty Python are no longer an active group that puts out new stuff due to the death of Graham Chapman, who is arguably the most underrated member of Monty Python that came up with some of the most memorable and genius moments in the group sketches and scenes in their movies. He came up with the idea of using a parrot in the parrot sketch of their sketch show, and that sketch is considered the greatest Monty Python sketch of all time. R.I.P. Graham Chapman. With them mixing surreal, dark, and satire together, the members' unique comedic personalities and their complete disregard of how to do comedy traditionally in sketches and movies with the punchline becoming blurrier and blurrier, they completely changed comedy forever with their style, and they heavily influenced alternative comedy and alternative comedians in general. Another influence on alternative comedy is a comedian hailing from the emerging Boston comedy scene in the late 70s to early 80s, who is Stephen Wright. Stephen Wright's style of comedy features him using a lethargic voice and slow, deadpan delivery of ironic, philosophical, and sometimes nonsense jokes, paraprodigians, non sequiturs, anti-humor, and one-liners with contrived situations. One-liners was the comedic delivery style used before Stephen Wright started doing comedy, as one of the traditional stand-up comedy styles. When Stephen Wright came on the scene, though, it was a breath of fresh air with someone with fresh, new, original, and unique comedy style. His one-liners were not your average one-liners, as you would tell already due to my self-describing his style. With him thinking abstractly with coming up with the jokes while interacting with the world, Stephen Wright heavily influenced the alternative comedy movement and style, particularly in the US, with his abstract approach to coming up with jokes. Thinking abstractly coming up with the jokes is quite prevalent in alternative comedy, and we will get back to that once we start discussing what alternative comedy is. A quick fun fact, though, Stephen Wright heavily influenced me, and so has another comedian that Stephen has heavily influenced as well, who is the late, great Mitch Hedberg. If it wasn't for these two, I wouldn't be able to do the talent show, so I owe them a lot of respect for that. Moving on to the granddaddy of them all that influenced alternative comedy, and that person is the late, great New York-based comedian Andy Kaufman. Andy Kaufman completely changed how you could do comedy by going even further than Lenny Bruce or George Carlin did by poking fun at the conventions in comedy. Kaufman even went even further with a postmodern approach to comedy than Monty Python. Kaufman was a comedian that never considered himself a comedian, which has some truth to it because what he did up on stage was performance art, but it was performance art mixed with comedy, nonetheless. Kaufman was a comedian that was so weird and insane up on stage that made people that saw him live want to see him again, not because they found him funny, though some may want to see him live again because they found him funny, but because they wanted to try to figure him out. Kaufman was great at pulling out any type of emotion out of you and use it against you. When you would watch Kaufman perform live or on TV at the time when he was alive, he was completely unpredictable and he didn't know what he was going to do next. Not even his friends knew what he was going to do because he was so unpredictable. Kaufman even managed to create 2 new subgenres of comedy with his comedic abilities and acting abilities as well. Those comedy subgenres, two new subgenres of comedy with his. Sorry about that. I'm reading off a script, so I'm a little bit where I'm trying to find my place at. Sorry about that. But anyways, those comedy subgenres are anti-humor and cringe humor. Anti-humor is a subgenre of comedy in which it relies on no punchlines. Instead, the joke is something dumb. To be short, the jokes in anti-humor rely on an anti-climax. Some inspiring comedians that consider themselves anti-comedians think that doing anti-humor is just doing dumb jokes, but that is really not it. Anti-humor has a lot of logic and reasoning going into the structure of the setup and then finding a place in the setup to put your anti-climax at. A lot of these so-called anti-comedians don't get that's how you do it, but that's whatever. You're going to get to a lot of people that try to emulate something great and just be bad at it, just like my comedy. Anyways, let's move into cringe humor. Cringe humor is another subgenre of comedy that has no punchline in it and instead relies on embarrassing situations. Embarrassing situations like embarrassing sexual incidents, or someone saying something terrible, or somebody saying embarrassing, terrible things in this style of humor. Even though I don't like this website, BuzzFeed did an article about Kaufman about how he pretty much influenced half of today's modern comedy, and whoever wrote that article is correct about that. You can see his style being emulated on Adult Swim's original programming, for example. Now, I believe we have covered all the individuals that influence alternative comedy. If any of you have anybody else in mind that you think has influenced alternative comedy, feel free to comment that individual or individuals. Now, let's define alternative comedy. Define this genre is a hard one to do due to what people think alt comedy is in different ways, but I have a good idea what alternative comedy is from my research and watching alternative comedy. Alternative comedy is a subgenre of comedy that relies on abstract comedic delivery that blurs the line of where you should laugh. This is what I've gotten from watching and reading about alt comedy. Now, let's get to where did alternative comedy first started. Alternative comedy first started in the 1980s in Great Britain. The comedians that emerged out of this scene were mainly influenced by Monty Python, and these comedians mostly did character comedy, surreal comedy, and political satire, which made them completely different than the mainstream comedians that were doing mostly doing racist and sexist jokes. The old comedians that emerged out of this scene are Rick Mail, Lexi Sale, Edmondson, Nigel Planner, Don French, Jennifer Saunders, and many others. The alternative comedy scene that emerged out of the U.S. came in the later half of the 1990s. These old comedians in the U.S. mostly did surreal comedy and character comedy as opposed to observational comedy that most of the mainstream comics were doing. Most of these comedians were influenced by Monty Python, Stephen Wright, and Andy Kaufman. In the New York scene, you had old comics Sarah Silverman, Janine Garofalo, Todd Barry, Jim Gaffigan, Pan Oswalt, Mark Maron, Mike Birbiglia, and many others. In the U.S. scene, you had old comics Dana Gould, Bob Odenkirk, David Cross, Greg Barrett, Andy Kindler, Kathy Griffin, Maria Bamford, Zach Galifianakis, Brian Posehn, Vernon Chapman, John Lee, and many others. In the early 2000s, a special nighttime block was created for alt comedy, and this nighttime block is Adult Swim. So, as you can see, alt comedy has had a pretty big impact on the comedy world, but is it a good impact, though? Some may say it has had a negative impact on the comedy world, and I can understand how people can believe that, but I am opposed to this belief. I think old comedy has had a tremendous positive impact on the comedy world by making people have new things to laugh about in a creative and innovative way instead of an obnoxious, survey of an obvious punchline or the dreaded hacky observations. Well, that's all I have to say about this topic, you guys. Well, I'd like to thank you all for taking your time to watch this video, and if you like this video, then make sure you like this video, subscribe to my channel, and share this video. Appreciate it, guys. Special shout out to my growing British viewers, too, and my other foreign viewers as well. I find it cool and excited that other people around the world are viewing my channel. Thank you all. Goodbye, everyone, and have a great life.